have an ancient background. This, too, is conjectural. The musical instruments of the Bible may be classified as follows: string, harp, lute, zither, wind, bagpipe, flute, horn, pipe, trumpet, possibly nihiloth, percussion, cymbals, sistrum, tambourine. See individual articles on the above instruments for further information. There is no reason to believe that the musical instruments of Israel were crude in design, construction, or sound production. The Bible notes that the harps and stringed instruments for temple use were of the choicest imported Algrim wood. The trumpets of silver. 1 Kai 10. 11, 12. New 10. 2. Undoubtedly, in the manufacture of the temple instruments, the most skilled craftsmen were employed. Both the scriptures and non-biblical manuscripts dating from before the Common Era testify to the quality of the instruments as well as the competence of the Israelite musicians. The Dead Sea Scrolls state that a number of trumpets were assigned various complicated signals to be executed as with one mouth. This would require not only skilled musicians, but also instruments so constructed that the pitch might be regulated in order to bring them all into tune with one another. Freedom from dissonance is indicated by the inspired account of the music at the inauguration of Solomon's temple. The 120 trumpeters and the singers were as one in causing one sound to be heard. 2 Ch 5. 12, 13. The Bible lists but 4 instruments as definitely being in the temple orchestra: trumpets, harps, stringed instruments heb, never middle lim, and cymbals. While this may not seem to be a complete orchestra by modern standards, it was never intended to be a symphony orchestra, but only to provide accompaniment for the singing at the temple. Such a combination of instruments would serve this purpose excellently. 2 Ch 29. 25, 26. Ne 12. 27, 41, 42. As to the times when the sacred instruments performed, the scriptures enumerate the following in connection with the trumpets: in the day of your rejoicing, and in your festal seasons, and at the commencements of your months, you must blow on the trumpets over your burnt offerings and your communion sacrifices. New 10. 10. After the temple music organization was established, it is likely that the rest of the instruments joined the trumpets on these and other special occasions. This conclusion, as well as the musical procedure followed, seems to be indicated by the order of events described as taking place when sacred services were revived by King Hezekiah after he had cleansed the temple. At the time that the burnt offering started, the song of Jehovah started and also the trumpets, even under the direction of the instruments of David the king of Israel. And all the congregation were bowing down while the song was resounding and the trumpets o textoi acute miritra longo. Music 453 duty common to other Levites in order to devote themselves wholly to their service. 1 Ch 9. 33. Their continuance as a special group of Levites is emphasized by their being listed separately among those returning from Babylon. As 2. 40, 41. Even the authority of the Persian king Artaxerxes Longimanus was brought to bear in their behalf, exempting them, along with other special groups, from tax, tribute, and toll. As 7. 24. Later, the king commanded that there was to be a fixed provision for the singers as each day required. Although Artaxerxes is credited with this order, most likely it was issued by Ezra on the basis of the power granted to him by Artaxerxes. Ne 11. 23. As 7. 18-26. Thus, it is understandable that, although the singers were all Levites, the Bible makes reference to them as a special body, speaking of the singers and Levites. Ne 7. 1. 13. 10. Apart from temple worship, other singers, men and women, are spoken of in Scripture. Examples of these are the male and female singers maintained by Solomon in his court. Also, about 200 singers of both sexes who, in addition to the Levite musicians, returned from Babylon. EC 2. 8. As 2. 65. Ne 7. 67. These non-Levite singers, common in Israel, were employed not only to enhance various festive occasions, but also to chant dirges in times of sorrow. 2 Sa 19. 35. 2 Ch 35. 25. 9. 17. 20. The custom of hiring professional musicians at times of joy and of sadness appears to have continued into the time when Jesus was on earth. Mount 11. 16. 17. Although not as prominent as in the Hebrew scriptures, music is not ignored or overlooked in the Christian Greek scriptures. Instrumental music in connection with true worship is mentioned only in a figurative sense in the Greek scriptures. Re 14. 2. Yet singing seems to have been quite common among God's servants. Jesus and his apostles sang praises after the Lord's evening meal. Mr. 14. 26. Luke tells of Paul and Silas singing when in prison, and Paul's encouragement to fellow believers was to sing songs of praise to Jehovah. Acts 16. 25. F5. 18, 19. Col 3. 16. Paul's statement at 1 Corinthians 14. 15 concerning singing appears to indicate that it was a regular feature of Christian worship. In recording his inspired vision, John tells of various heavenly creatures singing to God and Christ. Re 5. 8-10. 14. 3. 15. 2-4. Nature of biblical music. The Israelites' higher plane of morality and their superior literature, as exemplified by the poetry and prose of the Hebrew scriptures, suggest that the music of ancient Israel most likely transcended that of her contemporaries. Certainly the inspiration for the music of Israel was far loftier than that of neighboring nations. Of interest is in a Syrian bas-relief in which King Sennacherib is represented as demanding that King Hezekiah pay him as tribute both male and female musicians. Ancient Near Eastern Texts, edited by J. Pritchard, 1974, p. 288. It has long been held by some that Hebrew music was all melody, without harmony. However, the prominence alone of the harp and other stringed instruments in Israel weighs heavily against this assumption. It is almost inconceivable that a musician would play a multi-stringed instrument and fail to notice that a combination of certain tones was quite pleasing, or that a specific series of notes as in an arpeggio produced a pleasant sound. An informed source on the history of music, Kurt Sachs, states, "The deep-rooted prejudice that harmony and polyphony, two or more musical parts or voices combined, have been a prerogative of the medieval and modern West does not hold water." He goes on to say that even among primitive cultures there are many examples of music running in fifths, fourths, thirds as well as in octaves, and that among these peoples, including certain pygmy tribes, there was a development of overlapping antiphony alternate singing by two divisions. O texto e acute muritra longo, mustache 454, 24 courses of sanctuary musicians is being addressed, or it may have been another one of the accomplished musicians, since the record says that they were to act as directors. 1 ch 15. 21. 25. 1, 7-31. In some 20 other psalms the superscriptions are even more specific in their reference to the directors. To the director on stringed instruments, to the director on the lower octave, and so on. PS4, 12, and others. See Shemoneth. Additionally, there are scriptural references to the heads of the singers, to the experts, and to the learners. All of this testifies to a high standard of music. NE 12. 46. 1 ch 25. 7, 8. Much of the group singing in Israel appears to have been antiphonal, either two half choruses alternating in singing parallel lines, or a soloist and an answering chorus alternating. In the scriptures this apparently is referred to as responding. X 15. 21. 1 18. 6, 7. This type of singing is indicated by the very way some of the psalms are written, such as Psalm 136. The description of the two large thanksgiving choirs in Nehemiah's time and of their part in the inauguration of the Wall of Jerusalem implies that they sang in this style. NE 12. 31, 38, 40-42. See Song. Chanting might be said to be halfway between singing and speaking. In pitch it is rather monotonous and repetitious, with the emphasis being on rhythm. While chanting continues to be quite popular in some of the world's leading religions, its use in the Bible appears to be limited for dirges, as in the case of David chanting a dirge over the deaths of his friend Jonathan and of King Saul. 2 1. 17. 2ch 35. 25. Es 27. 32. 32. 16. Only in a dirge or lamentation would the chanting style be preferable to either the melody of music or the modulation and oral emphasis of pure speech. C. Dirge. Mustache. C. Beard. Mr. Gr. C. Middle. Pi. A rapid growing herb, to the seed or grain of which Jesus referred in an illustration about the kingdom of the heavens. Mount 13. 31, 32. Mr. 4. 30-32. Lu 13. 18, 19. See illustrations and in pointing out that even a little faith can accomplish much. Mount 17. 20. Lu 17. 6. Several kinds of mustard plants are found growing wild in Palestine, black mustard brassica nigra being the variety commonly cultivated. In rich soil the seed, after a few months, may become tree-like, a plant measuring as much as 4.5 meters, 15 feet in height, with a central stalk having the thickness of a man's arm. The flowers of mustard plants are yellow and the leaves rather irregularly edged and dark green in color. The pods that develop contain a row of seeds, those of the black mustard being dark brown. In the fall the stems and branches of the plants harden and become rigid, strong enough to support birds such as linnets and finches that feed on the seeds. While some may argue that a mustard grain is not the tiniest of all seeds, orchid seeds being smaller, and that it does not actually become a tree, it must be borne in mind that Jesus was speaking in terms familiar to his audience. As far as Jesus' listeners were concerned, the mustard grain was indeed among the tiniest seeds planted, and it is noteworthy that the Arabs designate as trees plants smaller than the mustard. Mount 13. 31, 32. Muthlab and Muthlab ben. An expression included in the superscription of one of David's Psalms PS 9, traditionally said to mean concerning the death of the son. Some commentators suggest that it indicated to the musical director the name or perhaps the opening words of a familiar song that furnished the melody to be used in singing this psalm. One possibility of the word's meaning is advanced by the Targum, in which the superscription of Psalm 9 reads, "On the death of the man who came forth from between the camps," alluding to a champion. The apparent reference here is to Goliath, the Philistine champion whom David defeated in battle between the Israelite and Philistine. O text to acute muritra longo. Mystery 455 is threshing grain. 1t5. 17, 18 Also, as part of Paul's reasoning to show the Corinthians that the Lord ordained for those proclaiming the good news to live by means of the good news, he quoted Deuteronomy 25. 4 and then wrote, "Is it bulls God is caring for? Or is it altogether for our sakes he says it? Really for our sakes it was written, because the man who plows ought to plow in hope and the man who threshes ought to do so in hope of being a partaker." 1 Co 9. 8-14. The psalmist David used muzzle figuratively when he said that he set one as a guard to his mouth to keep from sinning. PS 39. 1. Myra, a major city in the province of Lycia. Situated near the coast of Asia Minor, Myra occupied a hill about 3 kilometers to mainland on the river Andricus. The site is now known as Tema. The ancient name Myra apparently embraced both the city and its excellent harbor. As a prisoner bound for Rome, the Apostle Paul arrived at Myra from Caesarea by way of Sidon. There he and his traveling companions had to transfer to grain ship from Alexandria that was sailing for Italy. Act 27. 1-6, 38 Myra was due of Alexandria and therefore may have been on the regular route of ships from that Egyptian city. Or, it may be that contrary winds. Act 27. 4-7 forced the Alexandrian vessel to change its course and drop anchor at Myra. At Acts 21. 1 Some ancient texts add in Myra after Patara. CJB, NE, RSFTNS. Although this addition would not be out of harmony with the rest of the account, there is insufficient evidence for determining whether the name Myra actually appeared in the original manuscript. Myrrh. An aromatic gum resin. K1. 13. 4. 6, 14. 5. 1, 13 Its precise source in ancient times is uncertain. but generally myrrh is the resin obtained from various thorny shrubs or small trees of the genus Comifera, such as Comifera myrrha or Comifera abyssinica. These shrubs thrive in rocky areas, particularly on limestone hills. Their wood and bark have a strong odor. Although the resin exudes by itself from the stem or from the thick and stiff branches of either variety, the flow can be increased by means of incisions. Initially the resin is soft and sticky, but, upon dripping to the ground, it hardens. Myrrh was one of the ingredients for the holy anointing oil. X30. 23-25 esteemed for its fragrance, it was used to scent garments, beds, and other items. Compare PS 45. 8. PR 7. 17. K3. 6, 7. The Shulamite maiden of the Song of Solomon appears to have applied liquid myrrh to her body before retiring for the night. K5. 2, 5 massages with oil of myrrh were included in the special beauty treatment given to Esther. As 2. 12 Myrrh was also one of the substances employed in preparing bodies for burial. Joe 19. 39, 40 It was apparently viewed as having sufficient value to be presented as a gift to one born king of the Jews. Mount 2. 1, 2, 11. Myrtle Heb. Headers. The myrtle myrtus communis grows as either a shrub or a tree and is common in Israel and Lebanon, growing well in stony soil. It is capable of reaching a height of 9 meters, 30 feet, but is usually found as a shrub 2 to 3 meters, 7 to 10 feet high. An evergreen, it is quite bushy in branch structure and has thick, shiny, dark green leaves. It blossoms with clusters of fragrant white flowers that mature into blue blackberries. Almost the entire plant has a fragrant spicy oil used in perfumes. The berries, though aromatic, are edible. The myrtle is found today particularly in Upper Galilee and the Valley of the Jordan, but it also grows in the Jerusalem area, as it evidently did at the time of Zechariah's vision recorded at Zechariah 1. 8-11, 16. Fragrant branches of myrtle were used along with the branches of other trees to cover the temporary outdoor huts or booths used by the Hebrews during the festival of booths. Eni 8. 14. 15 In the Restoration prophecies the myrtle tree with its otex toi acute muritra longo, 456 Naram pleasant. Son of Caleb, Jephunneh's son, of the tribe of Judah. 1 Ch 4. 1, 15. Naaminara middle dotmer pleasant. 1. Descendant of Cain. Sister of Tubal Cain and the daughter of Lamech by Zillah. Ge 4. 17-19. 22. 2. Aminat wife of Solomon and mother of Hobom. 1 Chi 14. 21. 2 Ch 12. 13. 3. A Judean city in the Shephelah. Jos 15. 20, 33, 41 Its exact location is uncertain. Naamanara middle dot man from a root meaning be pleasant. 1. A grandson of Benjamin through his firstborn Bela. 1 Ch 8. 1-4, 7 Having founded a family, the Naamites in the tribe of Benjamin knew 26. 40, Naaman himself is elsewhere listed as one of the sons of Benjamin. Ge 46. 21. 2. A Syrian army chief of the 10th century BCE during the reigns of Jehoram of Israel and Ben-Hadad II of Syria. Naaman, a great, valiant, mighty man held in esteem, was the one by whom Jehovah had given salvation to Syria. 2 Chi 5. 1 The Bible gives no details as to how or why Naaman was used to bring this salvation to Syria. One possibility is that Naaman headed the Syrian forces that successfully resisted the efforts of Assyrian king Shalmaneser III to overrun Syria. Since, by remaining free, Syria formed a buffer state between Israel and Assyria, this may have served the purpose of slowing down Assyria's aggressive push in the W until Jehovah's due time to allow the northern kingdom to go into exile. Cured of leprosy. Naaman was a leper, and while the Syrians did not demand his isolation as Jehovah's law required of lepers in Israel, yet to learn how he might be cured of this loathsome disease was indeed welcome news. Such news came to him through his wife's Israelite slave girl who told of a prophet in Samaria who could cure leprosy. Immediately Naaman set out for Samaria with a letter of introduction from Ben-Hadad too. However, Israelite King Jehoram, after receiving him with coolness and suspicion, sent him to Elisha. Elisha did not meet Naaman personally but, instead, had his servant tell Naaman to bathe 7 times in the Jordan River. His pride hurt, and apparently feeling he had unceremoniously and fruitlessly been run from one place to another, Naaman turned away in a rage. Had his attendants not reasoned with him and pointed out the reasonableness of the instructions, Naaman would have returned to his country still a leper. As it turned out, he bathed the 7 times in the Jordan and was miraculously cleansed, the only leper whom Elisha was instrumental in curing. 2 Kai 5. 1-14. U4. 27. Becomes worshipper of Jehovah. Now filled with gratitude and humble appreciation, the Syrian army chief returned to Elisha, a distance of perhaps 50 kilometers 30 mi, and offered him a most generous gift, which the prophet insistently refused. Naaman then asked for some of the earth of Israel, the load of a pair of mules, to take home, that upon Israel's soil he might offer sacrifices to Jehovah, vowing that from then on he would worship no other god. Perhaps Naaman had in mind offering sacrifices to Jehovah upon an altar of ground. 2 Kai 5. 15-17. Compare X 20. 24, 25. Naaman next requested that Jehovah forgive him when, in the performance of his civil duties, he bowed before the god Rimmon with the king, who evidently was old and infirm and leaned for support upon Naaman. If such was the case, then his bowing would be mechanical, being solely for the purpose of dutifully supporting the king's body and not in personal worship. Elisha believed Naaman's sincere request, replying, "Go in peace." 2 Kai 5. 18, 19. After leaving, Naaman was overtaken by Elisha's covetous servant Gehazi, who lyingly made it appear that Elisha had changed his mind and would, after all, accept some gifts. Naaman gladly granted him gifts of silver and garments. But for this greedy and lying act in which he tried, by misusing his office as Elisha's attendant, to profit from the work of Jehovah's Spirit, Jehovah punished him by otex toi acute miritra longo, Nabonidus 457 nara middle ra. 1. Girl. Young woman. A wife of the Judean Asher by whom he had 4 sons. 1 ch 4. 1, 5, 6. 2. From the root meaning shake off. A city on the boundary of Ephraim Jos 16. 5, 7 thought to be the same as Nararan. 1 ch 7. 28 Nara is generally considered to correspond to the no middle dot o middle dot wrath of oisbis onomastic and 136, 24. Josephus seemingly calls this site Nara. He relates that half of its waters were diverted to irrigate the palms near Archelaus Palace at Jericho. Jewish Antiquities, 17, 340-13, 1 It has tentatively been identified with Tel El Jissa, about 3 kilometers to me and W of Jericho. Nara middle dot ri possibly a shortened form of Neariah, meaning boy young man of Jah, son of Ezbah and a mighty man in David's military forces. 1 ch 11. 26, 37 He may be identical with Pararai the Arbit mentioned at 2 Samuel 23. 35, in what seems to be a parallel list. Nara middle dot ran from a root meaning shake off. An Ephraimic border city 1 ch 7. 20, 28, apparently the same as Nara. Jos 16. 5, 7. See Nara no. 2.